But what everyone is saying is what the biggest issue is testing. Was this?
There's not enough tests, right?
I mean, it doesn't do us any good if we don't have tests, right?
Yeah, it's a brand new virus, so it took us some time to figure things out. Actually, we're going at kind of record speed. We found out, we got the genetic code from the Chinese on January 12th. So that's when we actually could start looking for antibody tests and detection tests. And so there are three different kinds of tests. The first kind of test is a detection test, and they use a PCR technology, and they break open the virus, and they find a piece of RNA, and they match it, and they say, aha, you've got the virus. That's one test, and that tells you pretty quickly whether you're infected or not. The next test is an antibody test, and that tells whether your body has had to fight off the virus or not. So those are the two different tests. The antibody test, the first one was just approved by the FDA to go into production from Abbott Labs. It's called Rapid Test. It's part of their test suite. Everyone should have one at this point. The problem is we don't have enough of the kits, so we're short on the kits. And then the PCR technology, it's right now pretty manual. It takes some time to get what they call cartridges together, put the cartridges into a very rapid reading capability machine. So right now we're reading all these PCR machines by hand, and it's taking us a few hours. In a few months we'll have, and it's a long time to wait, but in a few months we will have tests that really are completely automated, and then we should start to reduce this backlog. It's a problem when you go into the hospital or see your doctor, and it takes you 5 or 6 days, or even worse, 10 days to get the results back. And so that's what we're trying to work on right now, is the backlog. That helps.
So the antibody tests are the same category. There just aren't any out there available, or very few, right?
Yeah, we have the machines, but the reagents have to be made. Right now, I think we have a capacity of doing about, I think Abbott has, they can do about 100,000 a week. I think they're going up to 200,000 a week shortly, in that range. So right now we're doing about 150,000 viral detection tests a week. And that's, so we need to do a lot more than that in order to really understand where the virus is and to get rid of the backlog we've got.
Is there anything the federal government can do? I've heard the Defense Production Act bandied about a lot to increase the production of the reagents and the other materials needed for these tests.
Well, there's not much we can there. So we have a couple of different area issues. On the PCR test, we've got a problem with the swabs. It turns out that we put our manufacturing plant for swabs in Italy, right in the place where they had the biggest problem, the biggest problem with the coronavirus.
I was sure you were going to say China, but it's not this time. It's someplace even worse, right? Yeah, okay.
And so our only solution is this little tiny factory in Maine called Puritan, and they manufacture swabs too. But the Lombardy plant called Copan is shut down, and it turns out that swabs are really important to get the right amount of stuff into the PCR machine. So we're getting a lot of challenges, putting the swabs in, taking them out, getting the right results back on the PCR test, and that's the viral detection test. On the antibody test, the issue is it just came out, and they have to manufacture enough of the kits and the reagents. So we're running short. So on one hand, we're getting swab problems. On the other hand, we're having a reagent supply issues, and it's working its way through the system, but it is extremely frustrating because we've got some really good, very accurate tests ready to go out, and we've got equipment in place, but the doctors just can't don't have the supplies to actually run them.
What sort of time frame are we looking at to even begin to really gear up?
Yeah, well, it depends on what you want to do, right? Right now we've got some control. We've run, as I said, about 100,000 tests a day. I think several. I think 2 million have been tested so far. But obviously, that's a small part of the population. So, in order to really ramp up, we've got to do. We have to test that level of we have to have that level of test about every day, believe it or not. So we have to get a lot faster and have a lot more capacity in our supply chain in order to do that. And that really tells you where the virus is, so you can start to fight the virus. Right now, we're sort of throwing knives in the dark, and that's tough.
Yeah, I know here in Michigan, I'm not sure if it's a lack of testing or if it's actually starting to work, but the number of new cases does seem to be falling per day here in Michigan, at least a little bit. What's your thought on that?
I think we've run through the peak, and that's great news. So no, I've seen the data; it's flat, and so the question is, is it going to jump up a little bit more and then come down, or is it really peaking and coming down? And that's an important understanding to have. We have to know the difference between we're still climbing or we're coming back down. Once you start to come back down, and you know that you're going back down, then if you come back down with new cases, about 14 straight days, we can start to think about possibly looking at the option of reopening some of the, a part of the of Michigan. But right now we haven't gotten to that many days of straight going downward decline. That'll really tell us whether we're in a downward decline, and that's really great news because then you can really start to plan the next steps. Right now we can't do that yet.
So I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's May 1st is when our lockdown supposedly is going to end. It doesn't sound like in what you just said that it's going to end on May 1st.
It's from the data we have right now. It doesn't look like it. I would say we're not going to hit the May 1st deadline. We're probably going to have to extend it slightly. So the trick is to get to what they call a reproductive value of less than 1. And once you get to a reproductive level of less than 1, that means the virus is starting to die out because it's not reproducing itself, right? 1 to 1. If you only have 0.7 to 1, eventually it dies out. So once you get below 1, then the virus is starting to die out, and that's what we're trying to measure. Whether it's the dying or whether it's over 1, in which case every time a new one comes on, it's going to affect more people and it's going to actually expand again. So that's what we're trying to get to, a level below R1. And we know that social distancing is our best way of doing that. That helps by our statistics right now. It helps get rid of about 0.6. So the virus starts at 2.3 or so. 0.6 of it's removed by social distancing. Then you start to protect some of your senior citizens, and they go down another 0.2. And then you start to do more testing and start to shelter people and so on. And that gets you down to the 1 level. And that's we're right around the 1 level right now, according to the most recent data. And we were actually slightly below 1 about 5 or 6 days ago. And then I think there were a couple things that happened. We got a little bit more relaxed, first of all. Second of all, we got a whole bunch of new test data that showed that started to change our model slightly. And for a few days there, we were actually below 1. And that was exciting to see because we were actually doing it. But then it started to spike up again. And I'm not sure why. Sometimes it can just be that it's moving across the state. So you're getting more tests in a new area of the state, and you're have a little bit more than you thought. Other times it's because people got a little bit relaxed and ready to go out and about, and it bumped up again. So that was disappointing to see that go up.
There's a whole bunch of clinical trials going on for various treatments and vaccines. I know there's one that actually came out of Karmanos Cancer Center, where they're talking about using a low dose of an anti-cancer drug that disturbs, I guess, viral proteins to fight this thing. What do you think is most promising there?
So the 2 different kind of scenarios of the future. The first is to have a real vaccine, like you get one time for polio and you're done with the virus. That would be ideal. And we think we've got a whole bunch of new ways of doing vaccines that are exciting. And if they work out, it could be that we have one of those in as little as 18 months, more likely more like 20, 24 months, but in that kind of range. Which would be fabulous because then we could go back to normal life. What's more likely is that we'll have a partial vaccine within that time frame, and then some drugs that adds to it. These buggers are really hard to get rid of. They're old, they evolved way before we did, and they have a lot of resistance. And so what we do, for example, with HIV is we actually have to use a cocktail of drugs. And these kinds of developments that you hear about, an anti-cancer vaccine, anti-cancer drug here, chloroquine here, those are what they're doing is we're trying to hit the replication of the virus at a number of different states that it goes in. First at penetration of the cell, then at the replication of the nucleus, then at the endoplasmic reticulum and so on, as it works its way and starts to take over our replication mechanisms in our own body, we start to try to block each of those at each step. And with HIV, we've got cocktails. Sometimes there are 2 or 3 drugs that we put together, and they block it at enough steps that it stops the virus. And that's what we're trying to get to with a cocktail of drugs like you're talking about there. But it's not really a vaccine, sadly. That'll mean that you got partial blockage of the virus in some cases and not others.
So this cocktail, when do you think something like that could be available? Yet this year?
I think so there are a couple of exciting studies that have come out. Remdesivir's just come out. That's the Gilead drug that's coming through. And the pre-publications of that looked extremely exciting, actually. Chloroquine is coming out with some interesting results, a little bit varied. So that's already 2 drugs you can start to mix. Well, that's not true. Chloroquine they're starting to mix with a couple of different options. Mostly with antibiotics, but then with the antiviral drug that Gilead had, remdesivir, they're trying to add beta interferon with that to help the penetration of the cell. So that those are a couple of drugs that are coming down the pike that are already kind of cocktail form, and you'll see more and more of them added to our mix to start to try to beat the virus off with different people, which is exciting. So that's sort of. So the kinds of things that I'm most excited about, WHO has selected 4 drugs they think are really interesting, and we're going through clinical trials with those 4 drugs now, and we'll see whether or not those are coming together. And that is a single big trial of 4 drugs simultaneously against the virus.
All right, so
it's called the Solidarity Trial, if people want to look at it.
Summer, fall, maybe?
Oh, so the drug, so remdesivir has already been approved for Ebola. So that could come out pretty quickly. What's nice about these drugs that are already on the market is you test them, they're already available. You can use them off-label, request your physician to go ahead and put you on the off-label list, and he or she can already use that. And then eventually they have to actually go through clinical testing. And that takes a couple of years, but the point is you have access to a safe, well-manufactured, scaled drug that's already on the market. The more challenging ones are the brand new drugs that are coming out that are special just for this virus, and those will take 3 to 4 years. But that's sort of the mix we've got right now.
Okay. So social distancing for the remainder of the year or less, or more, what do you think?
So the experts are divided on this. The experts, but my personal opinion is this is going to be a long fight. This isn't going to be one we're done in August. Unfortunately, I wish I could say it is. What the president's plan is that we're going to stop the virus once, and then cold, which we've done now, right? It's getting we've kept socially distant for a long time, so now the virus load is down, and we're going to try to watch for hotspots as they come up and try to put them out. And that's the reason that these tests are so important. It tells you where the hotspots are. And the problem is we don't actually know where the hotspots are because we don't have enough testing density to figure that out. And so we could be surprised again. And I think it's going to happen the experts who looked at other kinds of SARS or MERS-like viruses indicate that we probably, if you look at the way the coronaviruses typically come and go, we're probably in for in each area of the country, we're probably into 6 or 7 more kind of outbreaks between now and 2021. So in the next 18 months, you can expect that we'll have to kind of modulate going up and then come back down, modulate coming up, and then we got a little bit of a hot spot, we'll have to come back down again. That's probably what is going to happen.
Yeah, right now the only way you can tell the hotspots is where the ICUs start getting overwhelmed, right? I mean,
yeah, and that's a great point, and that's a very late detection signal. By the time someone's in an ICU, you've already gone through 3 weeks. So if you think about that, if you have to wait 3 weeks to see your first indication, that means that with exponential growth, if you have an ICU rate, say, of 1%, and you have to wait 3 weeks, by the time you find out, they see that first ICU event, you've had to wait for, if you have a weekly replication, you've had to wait for 3 replications, which means at a 1% rate of ICU involvement, which we're having right now, that means 3 weeks ago, you already had 100 cases, right? Yeah. So you already started with 100 cases, and you just saw the first one 3 weeks later. By the time So every week it's replicating. So in week 2, you don't know, you haven't seen that case yet, you've got 200 cases. In week 4, in week 3, when you actually see that first case, you actually have 400 cases to worry about that are out there. So if we can move that signal back from ICU signal 3 weeks to a true test, then you know what after 3 or 4 days, and then you really can stop the virus. But if you have to wait till the person's their first indication is an ICU bed, boy, that virus had a long time to work its way through the system. And that's the challenge we're having right now. If that makes sense.
Okay.
So that's why we need some more tests. We need them faster.
As usual, Mr. Sunshine here. Yeah.
It'll get better. It'll get better.
Okay.
It's a little bit of ways to go.
All right.
How much, last question, because it came up. How much does the temperature factor weigh in? For instance, typically on the flu season, you don't see as much in the summer. I wouldn't call this flu by any means, but do you think that's going to have any impact?
We are really hopeful. Most coronaviruses are labile. They are affected by the heat. Unfortunately, we don't know about this one. It's pretty early. And the problem is we're seeing a lot of it in hot tropical Africa, hot tropical India. And so we're thinking maybe we're not going to get so lucky. But that is a big factor for the flu. And what's nice about that is that the flu season's over. So we don't have to worry so much about the flu and getting both coronavirus and flu all at once, which is a thumbs up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Okay,
So
Fred, give us your contact information one more time if people want to get in touch with you.
Absolutely. It's fred.brown.ch@gmail.com. And I also have a site if you're interested. It's actually fredbrown.com. So feel free to check it out. It's all about the coronavirus, and I hope you guys, I hope it's helpful.
Traditional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life. But LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.